Hey, Kara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I am Kara O'Loughlin, founder of Equine Bodywork Online and Ground Pole Workouts, and I'm a licensed massage therapist for horses.
And I am Chelsie Brooks. I am an equine behavior specialist.
And you are in the Tack Room with Kara and Chelsie. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to have us talk about anything in our next episodes, make sure to drop the comment below and ask us anything that you want about equine anatomy, physiology, behavior, kinesiology, all the good stuff. So here we go. We're chatting about horses. All right, Miss Chelsie, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about stifles today. I have questions for you about the most commonly talked about, I would say, but elusive joint in the horse's body.
I agree with that.
And that is, right? That is the stifle. So I'm going to just start it right off and get right into it. Can you tell everybody a little bit about the anatomy of the stifle and how it works?
Stifle anatomy. So first you have your femur bone, which runs from the hip down into the stifle. And then you have your tibia, which is that kind of big hind leg bone. And in between is the meniscus. So you're not walking bone on bone. So you have your meniscus. Humans have them too in our knee. It's a very common injury. You can tear your meniscus. Horses can tear their meniscus too. So that is the cushion so that it doesn't hurt to move on your stifle. You also have a number of ligaments that are attaching the two bones, and you have your muscles. So you've got your quadriceps running in. So the quadriceps are the main movers of the stifle. There's also the bicep femoris, which is part of the hamstrings, but mostly the quadriceps are moving. You do have a patella, just like we have in our knee. So the patella glides over the stifle joint. So when you ask someone who is really into equine anatomy, where is the knee of the horse? Their answer will be the stifle, which is kind of interesting because most people think the knee is actually in the front limbs, but it's not. What we think of as the knee is actually the wrists. And so when you think of our knee and the anatomy of our knee, it's most similar to the anatomy of the horse's stifle. The cool thing about the stifle is that it can lock, and it's awesome because it locks in a way that allows the horse to sleep standing up without using any muscle tension or muscle contraction. So the femur, which is that one that runs from the hip down, has this little hook on it. And when it's locked, I have a diagram that I'll show you, but when it's locked, the patella actually can come up and hook on. So the ligaments are stuck here, hooked onto the hook of the femur. And that hook allows the horse to not have to actually have any contraction in their muscles so that they sleep standing up with minimal effort. When you have horses where the stifle is unable to hook onto, or the ligaments are unable to hook onto that hook in the femur, you're going to have horses that might develop some sleep issues because they're just not able to get the sleep and the rest that they need. So here's my little diagram. This is actually from the American Farrier Journal. So I did not create this, but I love this because it really shows how the stifle hooks on when it's in that stay apparatus. And when it's not, it's able to glide. Now, the problem is when this becomes locked and for whatever reason, a horse can't unlock it. That's where we get that term locking stifles. So that happens often in young horses where their muscles aren't developed enough to actually contract to unhook that. So a lot of times with locking stifles, you'll see horses walk very stiff-legged. They'll drag their toe. They'll be pretty uncomfortable. And so, or at least they'll look uncomfortable. And so a lot of times what we want to do is develop those quadricep muscles and those hamstring muscles to get it to be able to support the stifle in a way where it's no longer locked into that hook position.
Okay, very cool.
That's stifle anatomy.
That's stifle anatomy. So how can someone tell the difference because we were talking about this a little bit. I hear a lot of the time people will say the stifle's locking when really it's just sore. So, how can you tell the difference between the two? And then, from a bodywork perspective, how do you support that moving forward
Mhm.
and something that can be fixed? A lot of people ask, like, is this something that will go away?
The difference, if a horse's stifle is truly locking, like, it's pretty evident. When it's
Uh-huh.
sore, they're short stepping, they're maybe dragging the toe a little bit. You might see they're unable to really, like, support themselves on a bend. Their canter departs look weird. If it's locking, like, they're hopping at the canter. They're like it's a bunny hop canter. It's very peg-legged. It's a little bit just more drastic. The good thing, I guess, is that most of the time, if it is sore or if it is locking, the answer is you need to develop the quadriceps. So you
Okay.
need to do ground poles, a little bit of hill work. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, great, I have this huge steep hill. I'm gonna just trot my horse up it." Like, no. We're talking about a very minimal grade, um, just walking up at first. So for me, I would start with ground poles, work on ground pole work for quite a while before I even go to hill work, unless I have a very, very easy slope, and then I would maybe do some hill work also. Body work is great because what it can do is bring circulation to the joint and to the tissue of the quadriceps. So there are certain techniques in body work that can actually like wake up a muscle. So you can do a little bit of like tapotement, but you don't want to do it on this tapotement. That's a very technical term. A little bit of like percussion, but you
Okay.
don't want to do that anywhere near the stifle joint. You would want to do that on the quadriceps. So if you don't know where your quadriceps are, look it up, have a body worker come and teach you how to do it, or join Equine Bodywork Online. We have a whole thing on stifles. So you guys, if you have
Mhm.
stifle
Yeah.
questions or you want to help your horse's stifles, like you can do it and we will teach you how.
Yeah.
So just make sure that when you're working on your horse's quadriceps, that you're not going in with a ton of pressure. Even if you're doing the percussion, it is literally like if you were to pat a cat. Like that's kind of how
Yeah.
I think of like it's less pressure than patting a dog. It's a very, very, very light pressure. But you could do that on the quadriceps, any sort of effleurage, or we call that the 50 in Evo, where you're just kind of like stroking downwards from the hip into or from the pelvis into the
Yeah.
stifle. That would work too. And then if you want to just do passive touch on the stifle, sometimes that's really comforting to the horse. So just holding your hand over the stifle joint, no pressure, just bringing warmth into that joint, a little bit of energy into that joint. That can make a big difference for them too.
Yeah. That's good. That's so good to point out because I feel like just because they're big, we just automatically feel like we have to use more pressure, even if we're just patting or petting.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
people pat their horses so much harder than they pat their dogs, and it's like, no, we can be gentle. We
Right,
can use that gentle touch because they
right.
feel everything.
Everything. Yeah.
So, how do you feel like you see a lot of stifle problems that are often kind of misdiagnosed as something else that's going on with the hind end? Did I ask that in a way that
I
makes
think that
sense?
I don't I don't see vets misdiagnosing as much as I see people just thinking it's something else.
Yeah.
Like I'll hear like, "Oh, he's got some stifle issues from when he was a racehorse or a jumper
Yeah.
or whatever they want to, whatever they want to say." Um, and I feel that sometimes that either is a hawk problem, and because the stifle and the hawk move simultaneously. So a lot of times people will just go to stifles, but actually there's a lot going on in the hawk. We could have a whole nother discussion about the hawk too. And sometimes I see what people think is a stifle issue and it's a soft tissue issue. It's a muscle tension problem. So here is basically what happens with every joint when you have tension in the muscle. that then attaches to that joint through a tendon. So the
Okay.
muscle now it's tight. Well, what happens when you have a tight muscle often is what's going on is muscles have these, they're made up of muscle fibers, okay? And these fibers tend to snag on each other. So when the muscle contracts, and let's say I'm going to use my arm for it, for example, my bicep is contracting. Now we have fibers that are snagged onto each other. But then to release it, if you have a tight muscle, it can't release all the way. So now they're snagged on top of each other and you're trying to release it. But what's actually happening is the muscle is pulling onto that joint. So
Okay.
it's not allowing the joint to actually go back into its normal position, or it's in its normal position, but there's tension on it. So if we're talking about stifle, let me show you my
Right.
diagram again. If we're talking about stifle, you've got tension in here, okay? That's
Yeah.
pulling and not allowing the joint to just relax and have its normal fluid movement.
Right.
So
Okay.
if you can, and so often people are like, it's a joint issue, it's a stifle issue, but really it's that you have to be able to relax those muscles that attach to whatever joint that we're talking about in order to get the
Right.
joint to move properly again.
Yeah. I'm going
So,
to ask a question, which is one of my favorite things to hear you talk about. When there is an issue with the stifle joint, where else do you see that in the body? Either like physically tension or even how would it show up behaviorally?
okay, so we talked a little bit about like the hopping, like the bunny hopping into
Yep.
specifically the canter or the lope. You're going to see
Hmm.
that. What I often see with stifle issues is actually problems then going into the quadriceps and the hamstrings, issues with the hock, and then going up into the pelvis, issues like running through the pelvis and lower back.
Yeah.
And then on the
It's
opposite
crazy.
side of the horse, you'll get issues in the lower neck because they're going to be using, well, sometimes it's both sides, but lower neck so that they can propel themselves forward without having to use their hind end as much because that's ouchy. So you're also going to get like so much muscle tension in the opposite leg. So you're going to get muscle tension in glutes, hamstrings, quads, um, specifically,
Yeah.
and then through probably through the pelvis. Yeah. And then because
It's
everything hurts,
crazy.
you're going to get pole tension.
Yeah. The dang pole. I'm telling you. It's
Yeah.
it's like it's just crazy because people I think often horse and it's not just like it's not really ignorance, it's just a lack of knowledge that you have an injury, whether it's a stifle, hock, whatever, and you fix that injury or you're managing that arthritis, but you're not realizing how much it's affecting other parts of the body. And so you still
Absolutely.
have behavioral problems or you still have soreness and you can't quite figure out where it's coming from, but it's all stemmed from like this bout of like a pulled stifle or arthritis in the
Yeah.
stifle that's just starting and it's just affected every other part of the body. It's just crazy
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. And that's where as your profession comes in, it's like you have to kind of figure out, well, we all kind of have to figure this out, but is the horse not wanting to do something or being stubborn because
Yeah.
they don't want to do it? Or is there pain somewhere? Or like, is it bad training
Yeah.
that they've had in the past? Or is it actually a physical issue? Or is it a mental issue that used to be a physical issue, but now they're guarded? There's just so much going on that we as humans need to take into account before we can say like, oh, this is exactly why this horse doesn't want to do it. And the amount of times I've heard like, oh, my horse is just lazy or my horse just doesn't like that, it just makes me pause and say, well, let's dig deeper. Why is your horse acting
Yeah.
lazy? Why is your horse acting like it
Yeah.
doesn't want to do this? So, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And it ranges from so many things to being like, maybe this isn't the right job for them. And that does happen. But it's
Mhm.
also, this could be a pain memory from something that happened from a poor saddle fit 5 years ago. And
Mhm.
that's been rectified and it's been fixed. But the memory of getting on and feeling the pain or the pinch is still there. And
Absolutely.
so it's a journey all the
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. Bless their hearts,
Yeah.
the things they do for us,
I know. I know. And also, I feel like how much are they doing for you already? I think that's so important to put into perspective. Like maybe they're
Mhm.
not picking up the right cancer lead and that's really like making you mad, but you've gotten them tacked, you've gotten on them, you've gone through your warm up and everything's been fine. So can we just put up we like not picking up that cancer lead? Can we put it into perspective and maybe
Right.
think about it more and being angry about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
That's
really
crazy.
hard because, I mean, now we're going into a whole different
I
subject, and
know.
I think, like
We've wandered.
right. I think that a lot of us in the equestrian world, we're in the sport horse world, and we're
Mhm.
competing or we're wanting our horse to perform, and it's our sport too, right? Like, it's not just the horse's sport, it's our sport. Like, we put so much into it that we expect our
Yeah.
partner, like, if we were playing doubles tennis, we would expect both of us to be putting as much effort into it as possible. But we're working with an animal that didn't really have a say in whether or not this was his sport. He might be like, "Well, my sport was actually, like, water polo, and I didn't really wanna be doing this." So,
Yeah.
I think just figuring out, like, how much grace that we should be giving them in my mind, and I think in your mind, we should be giving them all the grace in the world,
I agree.
and yet we have an expectation that we are athletes and they are athletes, and so yeah, I love what you say, just, like, putting it in perspective of, like, even that they allowed a saddle to go on them today is, like,
Yeah.
pretty like, I
Yeah.
can't put a
Look how
saddle
much they've
on a
done.
bear, you know? Yeah, so
Exactly. Look how much they've done already. And that's a mindset thing too. Like how can we shift the mindset of equestrians into I expect this to but look at everything that I've got today so far.
yeah,
Um
yeah, and I
but
think
yeah, I
it
guess
really
that's
is, like,
a topic.
the slowest one wins the race, like, the tortoise wins the race, right? And so much of that
God,
is
yes.
in the horse world too, and even in body work, I mean, the slower you go just even in my hand movements, the slower my hands move, the more the
Yeah.
horse, uh, relates to it and relaxes into it versus quick,
Yep.
so, I don't know,
Yeah,
it's horses are they're magical and amazing and wonderful, and they also break our hearts, and we just have
I
to
know.
we're required to
You're just
develop emotionally quickly in order to
yeah.
handle this, this sport and this group of
Yes.
animals.
Oh my God, yes. I do have another question about the stifle, and I don't know, I'm curious about it. I don't know if people at home are, I guess we'll find out. But is there a specific discipline that you find that horses have more stifle injuries than others?
Oh, that is a good question. I wouldn't say there's one specific one. Jumpers and dressage
Mhm.
tend to have a lot of stifle injuries. Horses coming off the track tend to have stifle. I mean, horses coming off the track have a lot going on because I feel like sometimes I shouldn't include them in like the same category
It's too much.
because they have just been asked to do so much at such a young age. Um, we should have a whole nother episode just on off the track thoroughbreds or off the track quarter
That would
horses.
actually be so good.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
we should do that.
Idea.
I think yeah, um, dressage and jumpers are some of the ones that have, in my opinion, the most issues with stifles. What is about movement that like
I think you were just gonna
yeah,
go into it when I was already asking the question,
yeah,
but, like, what about the movement that causes that to be more prone in those
uh-huh.
disciplines than others?
So, with dressage, riders are all about getting them to push from the hind end, sitting on their hindquarters.
Mhm.
So, typically, a horse is put 60% of their weight on their front end and 40% on their hind end. In dressage, the
Yeah.
idea is to flip that. So now we are
Mhm.
asking them, I'm not saying in judgment of whether or not we should be asking them this. Dressage
Yeah.
can do some wonders for horses if done right. But we are asking them to move in a way that is not normal for them. So
Right.
their body was built that they put 60% of their weight on their front. Now we're transferring that to their hind and they're loading the stifle and they're loading the hocks in a way that their body wasn't actually built for. So that's what
Right.
is happening in dressage and why there's just a lot of like overuse and overloading injuries in the stifles. Jumpers,
Yeah.
it's just the action of jumping. Like when you think about when they come
Mhm.
to a jump, especially high level jumpers, they're coming to a jump, they're having to bring their hind end under them in order to get their front end up. Now they're loading
Mhm.
all of that weight onto their hind end. And as they're jumping, then they're propelling their hind end over the jump. So it's just a lot to ask of the stifles.
Yeah.
And horses are, I mean, they do it and they're, I'm not at all saying like we shouldn't do this with them. All I'm saying is that we should
Yeah.
prepare their bodies to be able to do this well and maintain their bodies to do it well. I also will see stifle injuries in reiners, and a lot of it is the sliding stop. That's just really hard on them.
Yeah. That makes sense. That does make
Yes.
sense. And I just love when you point out like how important it is to just maintain their bodies. Like it really just is so important. No
Yeah.
matter what you're doing with them. We're doing it because we're enjoying it and we're lucky enough to have them be like, "Oh, okay, I'll do that with you." And so it's like maintain, you know what I mean? They're down.
Yeah,
I'll do
totally.
that with you. So
Totally.
maintain their bodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
I mean, I
it.
think of it as like when you think about every college athlete, every college team or pro team, they have their own setup. They don't call them body workers, but they have their own physiotherapists. They have their own
Yeah.
massage therapists. They have their chiropractors. Like athletes at a certain level are needing to maintain their bodies, and
Yeah.
amateur athletes should be maintaining their bodies too. It's not provided to them like it might be at a higher level, but in order to maintain healthy function
Yeah.
as we do our athletic feats, we should we should be maintaining our own bodies too. And if we want to be correct in the saddle, that is something that we really need to be thinking about, because what where our position lacks is also where
Yeah.
we're going to affect the horse. So
Yep.
if we're one-sided or whatever,
Yeah.
and we all have issues. There's no perfect rider, but we
True.
should be doing our best to maintain ourselves too.
Yeah. Do you find as a body worker that you can often tell which side? I think most riders are heavier on one side. I'm my right, and I have to really think about
Hmm.
shifting. Do
Yeah.
you can you tell? Do you
Yeah.
find that you can tell?
Hmm.
Yeah.
In fact, I work at a hunter jumper barn once a month, and the trainer and I get along really well. And I love to chat with her after each horse because I will say like, "Oh, does this rider hang on the right rein?" She's like, "Yeah." Like, and so I almost every time will ask her, like I'll kind of be like, "Okay, so what I'm feeling here is this, this, this," and in my
Hmm.
assumption, it would be that the rider is doing this, 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 and she's like, "Yeah." So
Yeah.
it's pretty fun. We kind of chat about horse issues and rider issues together and how they do correlate a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their body tells a story. It really
Mhm.
does. Like
Mhm.
the way they move it, the way they hold it, the way they're standing. And I feel like
Yeah.
people, I'll go in for a session and I'm like, I'm just going to stare at your horse for 20 minutes or so. Just let him loose in the arena and let me just watch because it really
Yeah.
does tell.
Yeah,
It does.
totally it does. It totally does.
It
And
does.
I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm uneven when I ride. I know that. So, but
We kind of
mm,
all are. I feel like
we
we
all
have a
are.
dominant side. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's the
We
awareness. That's the
absolutely do.
important part is become aware of it. Yeah.
Mhm. Become aware and do the best that you can with what you got, you know. I hope this was informative. I hope you know a little bit more about stifles. And like I said in the beginning, if you have any questions or you want us to address anything in our future in the Tack Room episodes, just put the comments down below and we'll see you next time.